The Hall of Claws was silent. 24 alien warriors sat around the massive stone table, each one representing their species' fleet. The hall was old, built 1,000 years ago from black volcanic rock. Ancient weapons hung on the walls. The air smelled like metal and something sharper, fear maybe, or anger. Warlord Kreshtar stood at the head of the table. He was Zathari, which meant he looked like a lion that walked on 2 legs. His fur was gray with age and 3 long scars ran across his face. He had fought in 30 wars. He had never lost one. Until now. The Catherine swarm has destroyed 3 of our settlements, Kreshtar said. His voice was deep and rough. 30,000 of my people are dead. They came fast. They killed everyone. Warriors, elders, cubs, everyone. The other species around the table growled or hissed or clicked their agreement. They all knew the Catherine. The swarm didn't take prisoners. They didn't want land or resources. They just wanted to kill. General Blackfang of the Fenrathi spoke next. His people looked like giant wolves with black fur and yellow eyes. We've lost 2 colonies as well. 5,000 dead. The swarm is moving faster than we predicted. They're animals, spat Commander Sreth of the Scarth. His scales were dark green and his eyes were like snake eyes, cold and yellow. We should burn their homeworlds to ash. We don't know where their homeworlds are, said Observer Chlik of the Variks. The Variks were insect-like, with 4 arms and compound eyes. Chlik's voice buzzed. They attack and disappear. We can't track them. Kreshtar slammed his clawed hand on the table. The sound echoed through the hall. That's why we're here. That's why we called this war council. We need to work together, or we'll all die separately. The doors to the hall were supposed to be sealed. No one was supposed to enter during a war council. It was sacred law, older than any of their civilizations. When the doors opened anyway, every warrior reached for their weapon. A human walked in. The warriors had heard about humans. The species was new to the galaxy, only made contact 10 years ago. They were small, soft, with no claws or fangs or natural armor. They came from a death world, which was surprising because they didn't look dangerous at all. This human was female, wearing gray and blue armor that was scorched and dented. She was limping, but that wasn't what made everyone freeze. She was carrying 2 cubs, Zathari cubs to be exact. They were small, covered in golden fur with big eyes and tiny claws. They were clinging to the human's chest armor, making small mewing sounds. One of them was crying. Who dares? Kreshtar started, his voice like thunder. The human held up one hand. Her face was covered in soot and dirt. There was blood running down her leg, soaking into her boot. I'm Commander Sarah Chen, Terran Expeditionary Force. I was invited to observe. I apologize for being late. You bring cubs into the Hall of Claws? Kreshtar's voice was deadly quiet now, which was worse than shouting. You violate sacred ground? Sarah looked down at the cubs, then back at Kreshtar. Her eyes were tired. I found them in the rubble of Settlement 7. They were crying. I couldn't leave them. Settlement 7 was destroyed 3 days ago, said General Blackfang slowly. Nothing survived. These 2 did. Sarah walked forward, ignoring the guards who had their weapons pointed at her. She moved like someone who was in pain but refusing to show it. They were in a basement under collapsed building material. I heard them crying. Commander Sreth stood up, his tail lashing. This is an insult! A war council is no place for cubs. Remove her. But Kreshtar wasn't moving. He was staring at the cubs. His eyes were wide. Let me see them, he said quietly. Sarah walked to him. Up close, Kreshtar was massive, 3 times her size, with muscles like steel cables under his fur. His claws could cut through metal. But when he looked at the cubs, his expression changed. He reached out with one massive hand, and one of the cubs grabbed his finger with its tiny paw. This one has my sister's markings, Kreshtar whispered. The eye pattern. My sister lived in Settlement 7. We found her body in the ruins. He looked at Sarah. These are her cubs, my blood kin. The hall was completely silent now. I'm sorry for your loss, Sarah said quietly. If I'd known, I would have brought them to you immediately. But I couldn't leave them there. They were scared and alone. You should have left them, said Observer Chlik. To die with honor is better than to suffer. Sarah's jaw tightened. They're children. They don't need honor. They need safety and food and someone to protect them. They have no parents, Sreth said. Among my people, orphaned young are given to the next warrior in line. This is proper. Among mine, said General Blackfang. Orphaned cubs are raised by the pack, but not in the Hall of Claws, never here. This place is for war, not for younglings. Sarah shifted her weight, trying to hide her limp. One of the cubs made a small sound, and she automatically adjusted her arms to support it better. Then maybe your war council should wait, because right now these cubs need someone to take care of them. They need medical attention, food, and somewhere safe to sleep. So do we start your war briefing, or do we take care of them first? It was the wrong thing to say. Warriors around the table bristled. Some stood up growling or hissing. The human was questioning their priorities. She was suggesting that cubs were more important than war strategy. It was insulting, but Kreshitar held up his hand and everyone went quiet. The old warlord was still looking at the cubs. His sister's cubs, the last of her bloodline. He had assumed they were dead. He had already performed the death rites. He had already accepted the loss, but they were alive. This small, soft human had gone into the ruins. She had heard them crying, and somehow she had brought them out. Commander Chen, Kreshitar said slowly. Settlement 7 was still burning 3 days ago. The buildings were collapsing. My own warriors couldn't search it safely. How did you get them out? Sarah didn't answer right away. She was swaying slightly on her feet, and her face was pale under the dirt. I heard them crying, so I went in. That's insane, said Sreth flatly. Suicidal. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But they're alive. General Blackfang was studying the human carefully. Her armor was melted in places. Her hands were wrapped in bandages and blood was seeping through. Her leg was badly injured. She had burns on her neck and face. She had crawled through fire to save cubs that weren't even her species. Slowly, General Blackfang stood. He was old, with white fur around his muzzle and scars covering his body. He had fought in 60 battles. He had led armies. He had killed thousands. He looked at Sarah Chen, at the cubs sleeping against her chest, and at Kreshitar. Then he bowed his head. It was a gesture of deep respect among the Fenrathi. You only bowed to someone who had shown true courage, true honor. She went into the fire, Blackfang said simply, when no one else could. The other warriors stared. Then one by one, they looked at Sarah Chen differently, not as an intruder, not as someone who had violated their sacred hall, but as someone who had done something none of them could have done. She had saved the cubs. Kreshitar gestured to one of his guards. Bring medical supplies, and food for cubs. His voice was still rough, but something in it had changed. The guard hesitated for only a moment, then ran from the hall. Sarah carefully sat down in a chair near the door. Her legs were shaking. She had been standing for almost an hour before entering the hall, trying to calm the cubs down. Now that she was sitting, the adrenaline was wearing off. Everything hurt. One of the cubs, the one with the eye markings, looked up at her face and made a small chirping sound. Sarah smiled despite the pain. I know, little one. You're hungry. Food is coming. Commander Sreth was pacing now, his tail whipping back and forth. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. The War Council has rules. Ancient rules. No cubs in the Hall of Claws, ever. It's our most sacred law. Sacred laws can be broken when lives are at stake, Sarah said quietly. You know nothing about our laws? Azrith hissed. You've been in the galaxy for barely 10 years. We've had these traditions for thousands of years. They exist for a reason. Then explain the reason to me, Sarah said. She was too tired to be diplomatic. Explain why children aren't allowed in a room where adults are planning how to protect them. Observer Chilik's antennae twitched. The Varix moved closer, studying Sarah with its compound eyes. The Hall of Claws is where we discuss death. Where we plan battles that will kill thousands. Cubs should never see such things. They should never hear such things. In our culture, we keep the young innocent as long as possible. Among the Fenrathi, General Blackfang added, we believe cubs should only know warmth and safety. Warriors fight so that cubs never have to see war. The Hall of Claws is stained with blood oaths and death promises. It's no place for innocence. Sarah looked down at the cubs. They had stopped crying now. They were warm and felt safe. That was all that mattered to them. But they're here now, and they're alive. Isn't that more important than tradition? Kreshitar sat down heavily in his chair. He looked older suddenly, tired. You don't understand Zathari culture, Commander Chen. When Settlement 7 was attacked, my warriors tried to evacuate. They tried to save the cubs. But the swarm came too fast. Too many. He paused, his clawed hands clenching. When a Zathari knows they cannot save their cubs, they give them mercy. A quick death, clean, so the cubs don't suffer, so they don't fall into enemy hands. My sister. She must have tried to give her cubs mercy, but something stopped her. Maybe she couldn't do it. Maybe she ran out of time. Sarah felt sick.
You're saying parents kill their own children?
To save them from worse, Kreshitar said. The Kithran swarm doesn't kill quickly. They take days. They make it painful. A Zathari cub would suffer for hours, maybe days, before dying. We consider it a parent's final duty to prevent that suffering. The hall was quiet. Sarah looked at the cubs sleeping against her chest. They were so small, so helpless. But these cubs weren't suffering. They were just scared and alone. They were waiting for someone to save them. No one was coming, Kreshtar said softly. No Zathari could have stayed in that building. Not with living cubs inside. Our instincts are too strong. We would have either taken them out immediately, which was impossible with the fire, or we would have given them mercy. We couldn't have left them alive and walked away. We couldn't have hidden them and hoped someone else would come. General Blackfang's ears flattened. The human didn't know this. She just heard crying and went to help. Stupid, Sreth muttered. Tactically insane. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But humans have this thing about babies crying. Any baby, doesn't matter what species. When we hear that sound, something in our brain just switches on. We have to help. We can't ignore it. That's a weakness, Sreth said. An exploitable weakness. Maybe, Sarah said again. She was getting annoyed now. But it means these cubs are alive, so I'm okay with being weak. The guard returned with medical supplies and a container of milk formula. Sarah took the bottle gratefully and started feeding the cubs. They drank eagerly, their tiny paws holding onto the bottle. Around the hall, warriors who had fought in countless battles watched in silence. Kreshitar stood up slowly. He walked over to Sarah and knelt down on one knee. His huge frame folded until his head was level with hers. Commander Chen, what you did going into that building pulling my sister's cubs from the fire, no Zathari could have done it. Not because we lack courage, but because our own instincts would have stopped us. He reached out and gently touched the cub's head with one clawed finger. The cub made a happy sound and kept drinking. You saved them because you're human. Because your species doesn't have our instincts. You heard crying and you went to help. You didn't think about mercy killing. You didn't think about whether it was possible. You just did it. Sarah didn't know what to say. I did what anyone would do. No, Kreshitar said firmly. You did what a human would do. And that's not the same thing. He stood and looked around the hall. My people have a tradition. When someone saves the life of your bloodkin, you owe them an honor debt. A debt that cannot be repaid with money or favors. Only with absolute loyalty. Kreshtar placed his right hand over his heart, then extended it toward Sarah, palm up. I, Warlord Kreshitar of the Zathari, swear before this council that I owe Commander Sarah Chen an honor debt. My life, my fleet, my people, all are bound to her service until the debt is satisfied. Sarah's eyes went wide. Wait, that's not necessary. It is our law. Kreshitar interrupted. You carried my bloodkin through fire when their own people could not. You gave them life when they should have found only death. The debt is absolute. He knelt again, this time lowering his head until his forehead touched the stone floor. It was a gesture of ultimate respect. A warlord bowing to a human commander who was barely 30 years old. Oh hell, Sarah muttered. She looked around the hall desperately. Can someone tell him he doesn't have to do this? General Blackfang stood. His voice was serious. Among the Fenrathi, we have a similar tradition. When someone protects a cub, any cub, they earn the pack's protection in return. He placed his hand over his heart. Commander Chen, you have the Fenrathi pack's loyalty. Observer Chilik clicked forward. The Variks do not have emotional bonds like mammals do, but we recognize actions that benefit the collective. Saving young is beneficial. You have our respect, Commander. One by one, the other species around the table stood. Some bowed. Some placed their hands over their hearts. Some made gestures Sarah didn't understand but could feel the meaning of. Even Commander Sareth, who had been angry since she walked in, finally stood. The Scarth do not bow to others, but I acknowledge your actions were brave. Foolish, but brave. Sarah looked at Kreshtar, who was still kneeling. Please get up. You're making this weird. The old warlord rose, and there was something like amusement in his eyes. Humans are strange creatures. You save lives and then get embarrassed when people thank you. I just didn't want them to die, Sarah said. That's all. That's everything, Kreshitar replied. He looked around the hall at the assembled warriors. The human has shown us something important. Something we forgot in all our wars and strategies. We fight to protect the young. That's why warriors exist. Not for glory or honor or territory, but so cubs can grow up safe. He gestured to Sarah. This human understands that better than any of us. She risked her life for cubs that weren't her species, weren't her responsibility, weren't even on her mission plan. She just heard them crying and went to help. General Blackfang nodded slowly. What does that say about us? That a species barely in the galaxy understands the purpose of war better than we do. The hall was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not hostile, thoughtful. Sarah finished feeding the cubs. They were falling asleep again, full and warm and safe. She looked up at the warriors around her. So, are we doing this war council or not? Because if not, I really need to find these two a proper bed. Kreshtar sat back down at the head of the table. We'll continue the council. But first, Commander Chen, tell us how you found the cubs. Tell us everything. Sarah shifted in her chair, trying to find a comfortable position for her injured leg. The cubs were asleep now, and she had wrapped them in a blanket one of the guards had brought. I was doing reconnaissance at Settlement 7. My orders were to document the destruction, gather evidence of war crimes, and report back to the human fleet. Why would humans care about war crimes in a conflict that doesn't involve them? Asked Sisreth suspiciously. Because we're trying to understand the Kethran swarm, Sarah explained. We're new to the galaxy. We don't know all the threats yet. High government wants information about how the swarm operates, what tactics they use, so we can prepare in case they come after human colonies next. General Blackfang nodded. A sensible precaution. I landed 3 kilometers from Settlement 7 and approached on foot, Sarah continued. My AI assistant, that's the computer in my armor, scanned for survivors. There were none. The swarm had been thorough. Bodies everywhere. Buildings collapsed or burning. It was... She trailed off, her face going pale. After a moment, she continued. I was documenting everything. Taking pictures, recording video, collecting data. The settlement was built in a valley, with the main buildings in the center. I was working my way through the residential sector when I heard it. Heard what? Kreshtar asked, crying. A baby crying. Sarah looked down at the cubs. I've got 2 nieces back on Earth. I know what a crying baby sounds like. This was different, not quite human, but close enough that my brain recognized it immediately. She took a breath. My AI told me to ignore it. Said the building was structurally unstable. The fire was spreading. I had maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing came down. It advised immediate extraction. But you went in anyway, Chilik observed. I had to know, Sarah said. I couldn't just leave without checking. So I followed the sound. It led me to what looked like a large house 3 stories tall. Or it had been 3 stories. The top 2 floors had collapsed into the ground floor. Fire was everywhere. The heat was incredible. My armor was alarming, telling me the external temperature was past safe limits. She paused, remembering. The crying was coming from below. There was a basement entrance, but it was blocked by rubble. I had to dig through. My hands, she held up her bandaged hands. The metal was hot. My gloves melted, but I could hear them crying, and it sounded like more than one. Around the table, warriors who had seen countless battles listened with complete attention. I got the entrance clear and went down. The basement was dark, full of smoke. My helmet light showed 2 cubs in the corner, huddled together. They were terrified. When they saw me, they tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. How did you get them to come to you? Asked General Blackfang. Zathari cubs don't trust strangers, Sarah smiled slightly. I did what I do with my nieces. I got down on their level. Made myself smaller. Spoke softly. I didn't try to grab them. I just sat there and talked to them. Told them I was going to help. That they were safe now. They don't speak your language, Sareth pointed out. No, but tone is universal. After a few minutes, the smaller one, the one with the eye markings, came over to me. Just walked right up and put its paw on my knee. The other one followed. I picked them both up, held them close to my chest, and told them to hold on tight. Kreshtar's voice was rough. And then the building started coming down. I ran. My AI was screaming warnings. Structural integrity failing. Exit route collapsing. Fire spreading. I didn't have time to be careful. I just ran up those stairs as fast as I could, holding the cubs, trying to shield them with my body. Sarah's hands were shaking now. A beam fell, caught me across the back, knocked me down. The cubs were crying. I got back up, kept moving, made it outside just as the whole building collapsed behind us. The explosion threw me forward. I landed hard. My leg broke. But the cubs were okay. I kept them protected. The hall was completely silent. I carried them back to my ship. Sarah continued. 3 kilometers, with a broken leg and burns on my hands. The cubs were scared, crying, but they held on to me. I kept talking to them, kept telling them they were safe. By the time I reached my ship, they had calmed down. They fell asleep during the flight here. She looked at Kreshtar. I didn't know about your mercy-killing tradition. I didn't know their mother had probably tried to end it quickly. I just knew they were alive and needed help. So I helped. Kreshtar stood and walked to the ancient weapons on the wall. He took down a long knife with a curved blade. The handle was wrapped in old leather and symbols were carved into the metal. This blade belonged to my grandfather. He carried it in the Unity Wars. It has tasted the blood of 100 enemies. He walked back to Sarah and knelt down again. This time he placed the blade on the ground in front of her. Among the Zathari, when an honor debt is profound, we give a weapon. This blade is yours now. It represents my oath. My warriors will protect you. My fleet will come when you call. My people will consider you bloodkin. Sarah stared at the blade. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's your family's. You saved my family, Kreshtar interrupted. These cubs are my blood. The last of my sister's line. Without you, they would be dead. The blade is yours. Sarah carefully picked up the weapon with her bandaged hands. It was heavier than she expected. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept the oath, Kreshtar replied. Sarah looked at him, then at the other warriors around the table. I accept. But I don't want to be treated differently. I'm still just an observer here. I'm not. You're more than an observer now, General Blackfang said. He stood and walked to her. From his belt, he removed a small metal token. It was silver, shaped like a wolf's head. Among the Fenrathi, we give these to pack members. You've earned a place in our pack, Commander. If you ever need help, show this token to any Fenrathi. They'll come. He placed it on the table in front of her. Observer Chilik moved forward. The Variks do not give gifts. We are not sentimental. But we recognize efficiency and effectiveness. You retrieved valuable genetic material, the cubs, from an impossible situation. We calculate your survival odds were less than 8%. Yet you succeeded. The insectoid tilted its head. We would like to study human psychology. Understand what motivates such irrational yet effective behavior. Perhaps it can be replicated. I'm not sure you can replicate it, Sarah said. It's just human nature. We don't think about odds when kids are in danger. We just act. Fascinating, Chilik buzzed. Irrational but effective. Even Commander Esesreth approached, though he looked uncomfortable. The Scarth are not known for sentiment. We value strength and victory. But what you did required strength. Physical strength to carry the cubs. Mental strength to ignore your AI's warnings. Strength of will to keep going with a broken leg. He hissed softly. I called you weak earlier. I was wrong. You have a different kind of strength. One we don't understand. But I acknowledge it. Sarah felt overwhelmed. She had come here as an observer. A low-ranking officer from a species nobody took seriously. Now she had warriors from a dozen different species treating her like a hero. I just did what felt right, she said quietly. Kreshtar placed his hand on her shoulder. It was gentle despite his claws. That's why it matters, Commander. You didn't think about politics or strategy or traditions. You heard cubs crying and you went to save them. It's the most basic, most important thing a person can do. And somehow in all our thousands of years of civilization and war, we had forgotten that. He looked around at the other warriors. This human, from a species we barely know, has reminded us why we fight. Not for territory, not for resources, not for honor or glory. We fight to protect the innocent, to keep cubs safe. Everything else is just details. General Blackfang nodded slowly. The old wolf speaks truth. We've been so focused on winning the war that we forgot what we're trying to win it for. So what do we do now? Asked one of the other species representatives, a reptilian creature with blue scales. Kreshtar smiled, showing his fangs. Now we plan a war, but we do it with a human perspective. We think about the cubs first. Everything else comes second. He looked at Sarah. And Commander Chen stays. She's earned her place at this table. The War Council began properly now, but it was different from any War Council that had come before. Sarah sat at the table with the cubs sleeping in her lap. Guards had brought a proper chair with armrests so she could hold them comfortably. Medical officers had treated her leg and rebandaged her hands. She was exhausted but alert. Kreshitar brought up a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed the attacked settlements marked in red. The Kethran swarm has hit 12 colonies in 3 months. The pattern is clear. They target population centers, places where civilians and cubs live. They avoid military installations. Why? Asked Sarah. Military targets would make more strategic sense. Because they're not trying to win territory, General Blackfang explained. They're trying to break us. Predator species have strong protective instincts. When our cubs are threatened, we react. Usually poorly. Observer Chlik pulled up additional data. Analysis of the attack shows the swarm expects one of 3 responses. First, defenders flee with their young, abandoning the settlement. Second, defenders stay and fight, but their focus is divided between fighting and protecting cubs, making them less effective. Third, chaos as instincts override training. Among my people, Kreshtar said quietly, there's a 4th response, mercy killing. When we can't save our cubs from the swarm, we prevent their suffering, but that means our warriors enter battle with fresh grief, with guilt. They fight recklessly, they die unnecessarily. Sarah looked at the display, studying the pattern. One of the cubs shifted in her sleep, and Sarah automatically adjusted her arms to keep her comfortable. So the swarm's entire strategy is based on exploiting parental instincts? Essentially, yes, Chilik buzzed. They attack population centers knowing it will trigger protective responses. The responses themselves cause as much damage as the actual fighting. Families torn apart. Warriors making poor tactical decisions. Entire military units breaking formation to protect specific buildings where their cubs are sheltered. That's horrible, Sarah said. But effective. Commander Sreth hissed in agreement. The Scarth tried to counter this strategy. We evacuated all cubs from threatened colonies before attacks. But the swarm adapted. They started hitting multiple targets simultaneously. We couldn't evacuate fast enough and... He paused, uncomfortable. When we did evacuate, when we separated parents from offspring, many of our warriors couldn't focus on fighting. They were too worried about their young. The Fenrathi tried something similar, Blackfang added. We grouped all cubs together in fortified positions with a small number of defenders. But the swarm learned to target those positions first. We lost entire generations in 2 attacks. Sarah studied the map. Her analytical mind, trained by years of military service, was processing the information. You're all thinking like predators, she said finally. The table went quiet. Several warriors bristled at the comment. Explain, Kreshitar said carefully. Sarah pointed at the display. You're all focused on the fight-or-flight response. Protect the cubs where they are or move them away. But you're thinking in terms of your own species, your own instincts. What if you brought in a species that doesn't have those same instincts? What do you mean? Asked General Blackfang. Humans don't have the same protective territory instincts you do, Sarah explained. Yes, we protect our young, obviously, but we're more flexible about who does the protecting and where. On Earth, humans regularly trust their children to other humans. Teachers, caregivers, family members. We have an entire social structure built around shared childcare. She gestured to the cubs sleeping in her arms. I'm not Zathari. I don't have the same instincts as their parents. But these cubs trust me now. They're safe with me, and because I'm not their biological parent, I don't have the same overwhelming emotional response that clouds judgment. Are you suggesting humans could evacuate our cubs? Asked Kreshitar slowly. I'm suggesting humans could protect civilian populations during attacks, Sarah said. Not just cubs. Everyone who can't fight. We move them out of the war zone. Take them somewhere safe. Let your warriors focus on fighting without worrying about protecting their families at the same time. The swarm would target your evacuation ships, Sareth pointed out. Probably, Sarah agreed, but human ships are fast, and we're good at running. We've had to be. Earth is a death world. Everything there tried to kill us for millions of years. We got really good at tactical retreat. Plus, the swarm wants to break your morale by threatening your cubs. They won't expect a completely different species to interfere. Observer Chilik's antennae twitched rapidly. The logic is sound. The Catherine swarm's strategy depends on predictable responses from predator species. Humans don't fit the expected pattern. They're omnivores from a death world with unusual social structures. The swarm's psychological warfare tactics wouldn't work as effectively. General Blackfang leaned forward. Commander Chen, are you saying humanity would be willing to risk their ships and people to evacuate our civilians? Sarah looked down at the cubs, then back at the assembled warriors. I can't speak for my entire government. I'm just a commander, but I can tell you what humans do. When we see people in danger, especially children, we help. It's not strategic. It's not tactical. It's just what we do. She shifted in her chair. Back on Earth, there are thousands of stories about humans running into burning buildings, jumping into frozen rivers, throwing themselves in front of vehicles, all to save strangers. We have firefighters whose entire job is running toward danger to save people. We have coast guards who sail into storms to rescue people they've never met. It's built into us. That sounds like a species-wide death wish, Sareth muttered. Maybe, Sarah said with a slight smile. Or maybe it's why we survived on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. We looked out for each other. We protected the vulnerable. We didn't leave anyone behind if we could help it. Kreshtar stood and paced around the table. His tail swished behind him as he thought. If the human fleet evacuated civilians from threatened colonies, my warriors could fight without distraction, without grief, without guilt. They could focus entirely on destroying the swarm. The same for the Fenrathi, Blackfang said. If we knew our cubs were safe, if we knew they were being protected by someone we trusted, we could fight with full effectiveness. The Variks do not have emotional attachments, Chilik observed. But even we calculate better when valuable genetic material, offspring, are secured. Efficiency increases by 37% when survival of young is guaranteed. Sarah held up a hand. Before everyone gets excited, I need to be clear. I'd have to propose this to my superiors. The human fleet isn't large. We're still building up our presence in the galaxy. We might not have enough ships to evacuate everyone, but you'd try, Kreshtar said. It wasn't a question. Sarah met his eyes. Yes, we'd try. The warlord nodded slowly. Then I propose we send a formal request to the human government. We request their assistance in protecting civilian populations during Catherine swarm attacks. In return, we offer full military alliance, human ships under our protection, access to our technology, trade agreements, whatever they need. The Fenrathi agree, General Blackfang said immediately. The Variks find this acceptable, added Chilik. One by one, the other species representatives agreed. Even Commander Sreth eventually nodded. The Scarth will agree, but only if the humans prove they can be trusted. They've already proven it, Kreshatar said, gesturing to Sarah and the cubs. This human walked into fire for cubs that weren't hers. She risked her life for strangers. If that's what one human does alone, imagine what humanity could do if we asked for their help. Sarah felt the weight of everyone's attention. I'll contact my fleet immediately, but I want everyone to understand humans aren't perfect. We make mistakes. We're still figuring out how to exist in a galaxy full of different species, but we'll do our best. That's all we ask, Kreshtar said. General Blackfang stood. There's something else we need to address. If humans are going to protect our cubs, our civilians, then we need to protect them in return. Any attack on a human evacuation ship should be treated as an attack on all our peoples. Agreed, said Kreshtar. Any species that harms humans, performing evacuation duties becomes an enemy of this council. The other representatives nodded or vocalized their agreement. Sarah looked around the table at these, warriors from a dozen different species, all agreeing to protect humanity in return for humans protecting their most vulnerable. A month ago, humans had been unknown in this part of the galaxy. Now they were about to become central to a major military alliance, all because she couldn't ignore the sound of cubs crying. There's one more thing, Sarah said. If we're going to do this, if humans are going to evacuate and protect your civilians, then you all need to teach us about your species. Your biology, your needs, your customs. We can't protect people properly if we don't understand them. We'll assign cultural liaisons to your fleet, Kreshtar promised. They'll teach you everything you need to know. One of the cubs woke up and made a small sound. Sarah looked down and smiled. Hey there. Did we wake you? The cub yawned, showing tiny fangs, and snuggled back against her armor. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the medical wing of the Zathari flagship. Her leg was in a healing brace and her hands were wrapped in regenerative bandages. The cubs, Kreshtar had started calling them by temporary names, Little Fire and Little Hope, were being examined by a Zathari doctor. The doctor, an older female with gray-streaked fur, smiled as she worked. They're healthy, strong. No lasting damage from the smoke or the trauma. You protected them well, Commander. They protected themselves, Sarah said. They held on tight and trusted me. That's what mattered. The doctor looked at her curiously. Why did you save them, truly? They're not your species, not your responsibility. You could have died. Sarah had been asked this question a dozen times in the past 3 days. By reporters, by officers, by curious aliens who wanted to understand human psychology. She gave the same answer every time. Because they needed help. That's all. They were scared and alone, and I could help, so I did. So simple, the doctor murmured, yet so profound. Kreshitar entered the medical wing. He looked different in ceremonial armor, more formal, more regal. Commander Chen, the council has assembled. Your government has responded to our request. Sarah's stomach tightened. She'd sent the message 3 days ago explaining the situation and the proposal. She had no idea how Earth's government would respond. And? Come see for yourself. They walked through the ship's corridors, the cubs following along. Little Fire kept trying to climb Sarah's leg, so she picked her up and carried her. Little Hope walked beside Kreshtar, occasionally batting at his tail. The Hall of Claws was full. Not just the council members, but dozens of other officers and representatives. A large holographic display showed Admiral Yamamoto, Sarah's commanding officer, broadcasting from the human fleet. Commander Chen, Admiral Yamamoto said formally, the United Earth government has reviewed the proposal. After extensive debate and consultation with our allies, we have reached a decision. Sarah stood at attention, still holding Little Fire. Yes, Admiral? Yamamoto's stern expression cracked into a slight smile. The answer is yes. Effective immediately, the Terran Expeditionary Force is authorized to conduct evacuation and protection operations for civilian populations in Cathran Swarm conflict zones. We're designating you as the liaison officer for this operation. The room erupted in cheers, growls, roars, and clicks. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. However, Yamamoto continued, and the room quieted. The Earth government has conditions. First, this is a humanitarian mission, not a military conquest. Human forces will focus on evacuation and protection only. We won't participate in offensive operations unless directly attacked. Kreshtar stepped forward. Understood and agreed, Admiral. We're not asking humans to fight our war, only to protect those who cannot fight. Second, Yamamoto said, we require full cultural and biological information on all species we'll be protecting. We can't evacuate people safely if we don't understand their needs. Already prepared, Kreshtar replied. We have experts ready to brief your crews. Third, any species or faction that attacks human evacuation vessels will be considered hostile to Earth. We won't start fights, but we'll finish them. General Blackfang stepped into view of the hologram. The Council has already agreed to this, Admiral. Any attack on human ships performing evacuation duties is an attack on all of us. The entire combined fleet will respond. Yamamoto nodded. Then we have an agreement. Commander Chen, you'll coordinate with the Council to identify priority evacuation zones. We're moving 3 carrier groups into position now. Within a week, we'll be ready to begin operations. Yes, Admiral, Sarah said. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Commander. You've just volunteered humanity for one of the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. This is going to be hard. People are going to die, but Yamamoto paused. It's also the right thing to do. Earth stands behind you. Make us proud, the hologram cut out. Sarah turned to face the assembled warriors. They were all watching her, waiting. Kreshtar spoke first. This council owes humanity a debt. Not just me personally, but all of us. You're risking your lives for our people, for our future. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. From this day forward, let it be known that humans are under the protection of this council. Any who harm them, any who threaten them, becomes an enemy of us all. One by one, the warriors came forward. Each species had their own way of showing respect, but the meaning was clear. They were bowing to humanity, accepting humans as equals despite being such a young species. The Fenrathi howled. The Scarth hissed in approval. The Variks clicked their mandibles, and what Sarah had learned was their version of applause. Other species she didn't even know the names of made their own sounds of agreement. When the noise finally died down, Kreshitar approached Sarah. "There's one more matter. The cubs." Sarah looked down at Little Fire, who was playing with a buckle on her armor. "What about them? By Zathari law, they need a guardian, someone to protect them, raise them until they're old enough to care for themselves. As their closest living relative, that duty falls to me, but..." He hesitated. "But they've bonded with you. They feel safe with you, and I will be commanding fleets fighting battles. I cannot give them the attention they need." Sarah felt her heart sink. "You want me to take care of them?" "I want to ask if you would consider it," Kreshitar said carefully. "Among my people, we sometimes allow cubs to be raised by adoptive families. It's rare, but it happens. You've already proven you'll protect them. They trust you. And you understand something important, that cubs need safety and love more than they need tradition." "I'm a military officer," Sarah protested. "I'm not qualified to raise kids, especially not alien kids. You went into fire for them," Kreshitar said simply. "That's the only qualification that matters." Little Fire chirped and nuzzled against Sarah's neck. Little Hope walked over and grabbed Sarah's hand with her tiny paw. "Oh no," Sarah muttered. "Don't do this to me." "Don't make this harder." Kreshitar's eyes were gentle. "I'm not asking you to be their mother. I'm asking you to be their guardian, to keep them safe while I fight to make the galaxy safe for them. When the war ends, when they're older, they'll return to my people. But until then, will you protect them?" Sarah looked at the cubs. They were so small, so innocent. They had no idea that their mother was dead, that their home was destroyed, that their entire world had changed. All they knew was that this human had saved them, had kept them warm and fed, had made them feel safe. "Yes," Sarah heard herself say. "I'll protect them." Kreshitar placed his hand over his heart and bowed. "Then I name them properly now. This one," he touched Little Fire's head, "shall be called Sarchen. It means firewalker in the old tongue. And this one," he touched Little Hope, "shall be called Kai-Chen, life-bringer." "Sarchen and Kai-Chen," Sarah repeated. The cubs made happy sounds as if they approved of their names. "And you," Kreshitar said to Sarah, "are now their guardian of fire. In Zathari culture, this is the highest honor we can give. You're not just protecting my bloodkin, you're protecting my people's future." General Blackfang approached. "The Fenrathi also wish to honor you, Commander. We don't have cubs to entrust to you, but we have warriors. I'm assigning a pack to serve aboard your ship. They'll help with the evacuations, and they'll protect you and the cubs. The Variks will provide technical support," Chilik added. "We've calculated that your success rate will improve by 42%, with our computer systems integrated into your evacuation protocols." Even Commander Sesreth approached, though he still looked uncomfortable. "The Scarth will provide military escorts for your evacuation vessels. We don't do sentiment, but we understand duty. This is duty." Sarah felt overwhelmed. Again. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll succeed," Kreshitar replied. "Say you'll save as many as you can." "I'll try," Sarah said. "That's all I can promise." "I'll try my absolute best." "That's enough," Kreshitar said. "That's all anyone can ask." The next week was chaos. Human ships arrived and integrated with the alien fleets. Cultural liaisons taught human crews about different species' needs. Evacuation protocols were developed and tested. And through it all, Sarah coordinated everything while also taking care of two energetic Zathari cubs who thought her armor was a climbing structure. Admiral Yamamoto visited her once, finding her in her quarters covered in cubs. Sarchen was sleeping on her lap. Kai-Chen was chewing on a datapad. "Comfortable, Commander?" Yamamoto asked dryly. "Not even a little bit, sir," Sarah replied. "But they're happy, so I'm managing." Yamamoto sat down across from her. "You've changed the course of human-galactic relations in less than a week. The Council species are calling us guardians of the young. Every other species is watching to see if we succeed. No pressure." "None at all, sir," Sarah said sarcastically. "Can we do this?" Yamamoto asked seriously. "Can we really evacuate millions of civilians from war zones?" Sarah looked down at the cubs. "We saved these two from a burning building. If we can do that, we can do anything." 3 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the human carrier TES Compassion, watching evacuation ships return from their third mission. They'd just pulled 2,000 civilians off a colony world hours before the Kithran swarm arrived. 0 casualties. Sarchin and Kaichin sat in especially DC,